Today, we're going to talk about a secret so important it helped win World War II, but so heavy it almost broke the men who were forced to carry it. This is the story of the Navajo Code Talkers and what happened when one single order finally let them speak their truth.
And that's really the question at the heart of all of this, isn't it? We celebrate the code, how genius it was, how it was never broken. But what about the guys who were the code? What happens when a soldier's greatest achievement has to be totally erased, not just from history books, but from his own life?
You see, for the Navajo Code Talkers, victory in 1945 wasn't the end of the fight. In a lot of ways, it was the start of a whole new battle, a silent one, against the very secret they were ordered to protect. So to really get it, you have to understand this idea of moral injury. For the Dene or Navajo people, warriors have a sacred ceremony. It's called the Enemy Way, and it's designed to cleanse them of the spiritual wounds of war. But here's the thing. A key part of that ceremony is you have to talk about what happened. The secrecy order made that completely impossible. It literally trapped the horrors of war inside these men. And this wasn't for a year or two. This silence lasted for 23 years. Just let that sink in. From 1945 all the way to 1968, a whole generation was born and grew up while these veterans were carrying this unbelievable weight, totally alone. And when I say the secrecy was absolute, I mean absolute. They couldn't tell their wives why they were waking up screaming at night. They couldn't tell their kids. They couldn't even tell their doctors. So how could they get help? They lived the lives of heroes but were forbidden from ever saying so. And here's the part that is just so hard to stomach. When they went to apply for their veteran benefits, the GI Bill that was building the American middle class, their official service records often said infantry, or, you won't even believe this, janitor. Their most vital, war-winning skill was just gone, wiped from the record. Talk about a disconnect, right? The paperwork says one thing, but the reality? These men and their incredible language were one of the biggest reasons the Allies won in the Pacific. So, after all that, what finally changed? Well, the answer wasn't some sudden change of heart from the government. It wasn't about righting a wrong. Nope. It was about technology. The secret just wasn't needed anymore. You have to remember, back in World War II, the human mind was the ultimate encryption device. But the world changed fast. The Cold War came along, and with it, all this new computer encryption. By 1968, with satellite communications becoming the norm, the Navajo Code was, from a military point of view, obsolete. And this quote just says it all. The Declassification Order in 1968 wasn't some apology. It was a practical, cold military calculation. The code was no longer a crucial national security secret, so they could finally let it go. But even if it was just a pragmatic decision for the military, for the men who had lived in those shadows for more than 2 decades, this order, well, it changed absolutely everything. It was like a switch was flipped. One day, there was silence and secrecy. The next, there was storytelling and truth. The spiritual injury they'd carried for so long could finally start to heal. And they went from being janitors on paper to being what they always were in reality, heroes. And that healing process was real. It was tangible. For the first time in 23 years, these veterans could get together, they could speak the truth of what they saw and did, and they could finally have those enemy way ceremonies that their culture knew they needed to restore peace to a warrior's soul. The emotional release must have been just immense. There are these video archives from their first reunions, and you see these tough, stoic men just openly weeping as they finally shared their stories. Can you imagine turning to your wife of 20-some years and for the very first time telling her what you really did in the war? And this wasn't just about them. It was about their whole legacy. Think about it. An entire generation of Navajo kids grew up thinking their grandfathers were just farmers or shepherds. And then, all of a sudden, they learned the truth. Their grandfathers were the men who helped save the world. So, the truth was out, and the healing could begin in their communities. But official recognition from the government that sent them to war? Well, that was going to take a lot longer. This timeline just lays it all out, and it's pretty staggering. The war ends in 45. The secret is lifted in 68. It's not until 1982 that there's even a national day to recognize them. And the Congressional Gold Medals,
Not until 2001. By that point, sadly, most of the original code talkers were already gone.
56 years. That's the gap between the end of the war and when they received the nation's highest civilian honor. 56 years. More than half a century.
And it just forces you to ask that age-old question, right? When the honor comes so late that most of the people who earned it aren't there to receive it, what does that honor really mean? Is justice delayed truly justice denied? When you look back at it all, the story of the Code Talkers and that 1968 Declassification Order is just this incredible lesson in the healing power of telling the truth, and a very harsh reminder of the real human cost of keeping secrets.
And maybe that's the thought to leave you with. For decades, the government owned their actions, their history, their very identity, all in the name of national security. Their long, long journey from silence to recognition brings up a question that's still so relevant today. Who really gets to own your story?